Today was a good day. School had been enjoyable. I'd aced the history quiz. I did well at remembering facts and figures. I could recite off the tip of my beak the dates and events that led to the formation of the Federation, the events of a better time before the great mistake of the axe roar was made. Tarvis said I was a nerd, but he was just jealous. Lunch had been quiche fruit, which was my favorite, and even the weather was perfect. That fantastic kind of sunny day that caused the air to be filled with updrafts, letting you easily glide and soar between the large, spiraling wood and stone architecture that made up the cities of Nishtal. I waved goodbye to Tarvis with a final flap of my wings as I descended down to the lower levels where I lived with my dad. We lived quite close to the ground, generally reserved for those less useful to the overall war effort against the evil axe roar, which made sense as a single father and his daughter were less important than a breeding couple. Once upon a time, your vertical position mattered, as the further up you were, the further away from predators you were. Now, though, predator attacks were rare on Nishtal, meaning it was more of a cultural relic than an actual danger. As I landed at my front door and carefully placed my school bag where it belonged, my thoughts were drawn to why it was just me and my father. I never knew my mother, having been taken in an Axra raid before I was hatched, my egg the only one of the clutch that my father had managed to grab on that fateful day. My dad talked about my mother often, and I wish I could have met her. She sounded nice. "Dad, I'm home." I pushed those thoughts away from my head as I entered my home. There were far more pressing things to be thinking of. For instance, the next episode of The Exterminators was on today. The last episode had seen the Harchin exterminator Dulini trapped in a predator's den, and I couldn't wait to see how she was going to make it out. Unlike a lot of Krakotl my age, I had no desire or fantasy to become an exterminator. While they were heroic figures, I was under no delusion that I would make a good one. The idea of facing down predators, climbing into dens of evil, and being the first line of defense against the axe roar filled me with terror. I much prefer the maths and science classes. "Dad, I'm home. You there?" That was strange. Dad always greeted me at the door, understandably protective of his only daughter. He'd been stressed recently, something about work, so maybe he was still there. Even weirder, the living room was also a mess, as if a stampede of Venlil had run through our home, tables and perches upended and strewn haphazardly around the room. Weird. Then I smelled it, a scent that caused a surge of fear to run through my brain. Of danger, of pain, blood. "Dad!" I rushed forwards, filled with terror, following the smell and opening the door to my father's bedroom, opening the door to the horror scene in front of me. Blood covered the walls and furniture, drying and dripping into an horrific mess. The window lay flung open, drapes fluttering in the simple summer breeze, doing very little to air out the smell of gore. Until this point, I had thought the violence and blood on the exterminators to be super realistic, but it didn't hold a candle to the devastation in front of me. In the center of it all lay my father. His belly was sliced open, intestines splayed out across the floor. Scratches in the wooden floor told the tale of someone trying to drag their broken body to safety before something had sliced his throat open. He stared blankly up at the ceiling, eyes devoid of any life as the pool of coagulating blood surrounded him like a final dash of color in this destructive canvas of death. I rushed over to his side, grabbing a hold of my father's wing, bone cold. He'd been dead for a while. Tears started to form in my eyes as I stared down at the dead Krakotl, softly whispering the next word as if he could still hear me. "Dad?" I don't know how long I stayed there holding onto my father's wing, silent tears falling to the ground as the beautiful day outside continued on as if nothing had happened. As if somehow just staying still and doing nothing would fix the problem, as if you could put the pieces back together from a cracked egg by just wishing hard enough. But eventually I had to do something, shakily getting up from my position. The exterminators, I had to call the exterminators. That's what they said at school, that if there was a predator attack, they were the first ones you contacted for help. I started towards the communicator, shaking like a leaf in the wind, before a sound caused my focus to snap back to my father's body. The sound of cracking bone and twisting sinew rang out as my dad turned to look at me, his eyes still blank and unseeing, his head twisting at an unnatural angle to stare directly at me, as if he was a predator. What? This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. You did this! My dad's voice was filled with anger, filled with accusation as I stood there shivering, feathers on end as my father continued to watch me with hate-filled dead eyes. No, I didn't. I tried to stop this. I tried to stop this from ever happening again. My father dragged himself forwards in my direction as I stumbled back in fear, his guts and insides trailing and slithering along beside him before he lifted a single wing to point at me. Predator? Meat-eater? Evil? I looked down at my talons at the end of my beak. The implements originally designed to eat meat were covered in my father's purple blood dripping onto the floor as I tried to wipe the mess away. No, I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to make it better. More sounds of cracking bone as the crocodile's head twisted to the side in another unnatural movement, as if looking at me inquisitively, questioningly. By becoming friends with a predator? By cavorting with the enemy? I took another step back, covering my face with my wings and shaking my head back and forth as the accusations rained down. No! I just need more time. I just need to work out the human's trick. I can save the Venlil. I can save everyone. Wow, this officially blew my mind, by the way. So crispy and tangy. The sound of the human caused me to stop hiding behind my wings. The sound of tearing flesh and grinding teeth filling the room as Joseph sat like an animal over my father, devouring and eating like the predator he is. I really hope whatever these things are that they aren't bad for me. I watched as Joseph tore into the corpse, covered head to toe in purple blood, ripping and tearing flesh and bone alike, as if it was nothing more than paper. Grunting and growling as he ate, tearing the body apart wing by wing, limb by limb, greedily shoving each appendage into his gaping mouth. With a final movement, it drove both hands into my father's rib cage, breaking the bone apart with ease and rummaging inside the body before retrieving its terrible prize, a still-beating heart. Joseph looked up at me, piercing eyes crazed and drilling deep into my soul, teeth bared in a wild, blood-covered grin. It then raised up the heart towards me in offering. "Hey, Estala, want to try some human food?" I woke up screaming, falling off my perch with a clatter, fear and terror clouding my judgment. It took a few moments to realize where I was through my ever-beating heart. I was still on Venlil Prime, back home. I was safe. It was just a nightmare. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the sight of Joseph covered in blood, of the blame of my predatorial ancestry. I lay there shivering on the floor, seconds turning to minutes, turning to hours, hating the monster that I was. Date standardized human time, December 13th, 2136. Look, Yegala is best girl and all, but honestly, I ship Kalam and Raphael. I stared at Joseph incredulously as the human said the most insane thing. Maybe he did have predator disease. How could any rational person take that opinion? You're joking, right? Their entire relationship is based around how much they hate each other. I'm not saying it would be a healthy relationship, but it would be an interesting one. Heck, maybe a good hate fuck would stop Kalam from being such a whiny bitch half the time. I had decided to change my approach to speed things along. Perhaps if I reminded Joseph of things the Federation liked that a predator would naturally find offensive, it would cause him to snap? Even you know that's a long shot. I had decided to steer today's conversation to the ever-popular Exterminators show. What I hadn't planned around that not only was the show super popular with Federation species, but it was also super popular with humans, having gained a cult following. Joseph seemingly being one of those who had taken a liking to the show. The human was sitting on the ground, surrounded by a flock of flower birds of varying colors. Seemingly word had spread among the bird world that this particular predator expelled tasty seeds if you chirped at them enough. The same predator who had handed me a bag of mangoes bigger than I was as soon as he saw me, the look of joy when he did so was almost adorable. Seeing Joseph sitting there in the daylight, surrounded by birds with a dumb grin on his face as he discussed my favorite show, it all made my previous nightmare seem silly. If I closed my eyes, it was almost as if he was just another Venlil or crocodile back at work discussing the most popular show in Federation space. Of course, If I closed my eyes, I also saw the blood-filled vision of the human that haunted my dreams. Nightmares are nothing more than bad dreams. What also didn't help was these random errant thoughts, which had seemingly gotten worse and more insistent. I half wondered if being around a predator for so long had given me predator disease. I'm still surprised you enjoy the show, considering what it's about. My statement caused the human to shrug. It's got fun character development. Why wouldn't I like it? Apart from Season 9, it's a very enjoyable, if at times flawed show. Season 9 is the one with humans, right? Makes sense you wouldn't be fond of that. Season 9 of The Exterminators had been the latest season, dealing with the disappearance of Venlil Prime and the appearance of humans. It would also probably be the last season for quite some time, considering that the Harchan government had basically been destroyed in the aftermath of the battle for Earth. Nah, it was mostly the Venlil Prime stuff. They used actual people's likenesses, actual CGI'd locations, was too real. Seeing the nice Venlil librarian I occasionally see get torn apart by Noah was too much. It stopped being a story and felt more like blatant lies. Joseph started frowning as he spoke, before finally brightening back up again. Honestly, the humans were the best part. Most villains in the series are boring and have basically been beaten repeatedly with the stupid stick, but the humans were super engaging. Honestly, I wish I was that clever. Would make life way easier. A look of confusion covered my face. Surely the Predator hadn't misunderstood the show that badly, right? You do know that humans are the villains in the show, right? Yes, so. The human returned my confused look in turn, as if the question was silly. A good villain can be just as entertaining as a good hero. We've only known about aliens for what, 6 months now? Most of our villains and heroes are human. I know it's unintentional, but half the enjoyment of the show is the fact that the main heroes do evil shit like burning babies or supporting genocide, while at the same time being sympathetic characters. I felt my heart drop at that statement. Having my job, my desire to help people summed up as just evil shit, was like an ice-cold dagger to my heart. I know I shouldn't care about the inclinations of predators, but hearing the person who was currently carefully feeding a bunch of flower birds inadvertently call me evil hurt. There's a reason you don't talk about that part of your job. There's a reason you lock those mewling screams of cubs deep inside your brain where nobody can find them. That was my job. I paused for a moment, gathering the strength to continue the sentence. If I wasn't here on Venlil Prime, I would have probably been part of Calcim's fleet. Oh. The mood trend somber, a contrast to the nice sunny day that it was. Joseph just looked sad, disappointed almost. Had I messed up? Would the human want nothing to do with me now? Or maybe he would finally attack me in anger. Somehow, Joseph abandoning you is a worse prospect than him attacking you, isn't it? Would you do it now? The human finally broke the silence, almost seeming to internally decide a course of action. Knowing what you know, if you could do it now without consequences, would you? The correct answer was obviously yes. The correct answer was to aid the Federation for the good of all herbivores. But that would mean specifically taking actions to hurt Joseph, hurt his family. I'd be the one making him cry this time. Just tell him the truth. I don't know. Not quite the answer I was hoping for, but at least you're honest. The human gave a sigh and shook his head, taking the time to push some of the more adventurous flower birds away and focusing entirely on me. I know the Federation has messed you up, so let's start with the basics, since I don't think you're a bad person. Evil requires choice. That most definitely wasn't right. Some things were just wrong. That's why every species checked their children for predator disease, to remove evil before it would inevitably do harm to others. No, some things are just wrong. Evil is evil. Predators are evil because they kill people. It took a few moments before I realized what I had said. I desperately covered my beak with my wings as my brain caught up with the words I spoke, panic coursing through my body as I quickly understood what I'd just implied. I did not mean to say that out loud. Not that I mean you, it's just the case is with, does that mean you're evil as well, since you're a potential predator, remember? Joseph interrupted my feeble attempts to take back my ill-advised sentence, providing me with a far easier question to answer, one I could answer in an instant without even thinking. Yes? I had expected anger considering that I had just logically implied that he was evil. But instead, surprise and shock flashed over the human's face for a moment before giving way to a sad pity. Wow, they really fucked you up, didn't they? You need a therapist, but until then... Jesus, okay, apart from predators, what's the most dangerous thing on your home planet? That took me a few moments to work out. Nishtal was mostly a safe and happy place. Everything that was right with the Federation in one place. But there was one thing that was always a danger. Storms. If you get caught in one, they can be dangerous. A few people each year will die from getting caught in one. So storms are evil, right, because they kill people? I scoffed at that silly idea. Where was Joseph going with this? No, of course not. They're just storms. Exactly, because there's no choice in the matter. A storm doesn't choose where it blows. It just is. In the same way that I have no choice about the placement of my eyes, or you have no choice about your ancestral ability to eat meat. Of course, unlike a storm, you have free will. You have choices about other things. Since you learned of your history, have you had any desire to hurt people? What kind of question was that? Of course I hadn't. No? You made any plans hunt a Venlil or a dossier? I'm sure you could take one in a fight. No. Are you going to eat somebody? No! I mean, if you're worried about the meat allergy, I can lend you an EpiPen, would fix the logistics of doing such an act, right? No! I'm not going to do something as vile as eating someone. Where had this side of the human suddenly come from? Why was Joseph suddenly advocating for me to do such a terrible act? Was that the definition of a pack predator? One who was trying to get me to be part of his pack? Was that the predator's final plan? Because regardless of your biology, you have the choice of harming someone else. While it's hardly a difficult choice, it is still a choice. That's why the Axrur are evil, because they choose to be child-murdering psychopaths. Evil requires choice. I felt myself calm down a little as I followed the human's logic. I wasn't sure if I accepted it, but I had to admit it made sense. You haven't felt any different since you learned the truth, have you? Still, there was one flaw in my supposed innocence, the original statement that triggered this conversation. I still chose to become an exterminator. Why? Why did you become an exterminator? The question from the human brought my thoughts back to the nightmare. Of that day, my entire life had been upturned. That sickening smell of blood that I couldn't forget. When I was 10, I found my father's body after a predator attack. I wanted nobody else to feel the pain like I did. So 2 years later, when the exterminators offered me a chance to leave the orphanage and help people, I did. Wait, hold on. They hired you at 12 years old from a fucking orphanage? There was a look of shock and anger on Joseph's face, a sudden change that caused me to instinctively lean back in fear. How was this the statement that caused the predator to go into a rage out of everything else I'd said today? Many soldiers and exterminators are hired from orphanages. It's a good way for us to aid against the Axrur, for those who otherwise couldn't. What is wrong with the Federation? The human seemed to struggle to get the words out, emotions seemingly overriding any real sense of sentence structure and logical thought. A look of confusion washed over my face at his reaction. Why was he making this such a big deal? Okay, we're going to circle back to that later, since it seems if I get distracted by every atrocity the Federation has done, I'm never going to finish my point. Ironically, it does, however, reinforce what I was going to say. Joseph took a few moments to take a deep breath, regaining his composure as he continued. I was entirely curious about what he was going to say now. The fact is, the messed up viewpoint against predators is everywhere in your culture, to the point that there are basically zero voices against it. As much as people want to believe that they are special, brainwashing, and propaganda works. While presumably you've done messed up things, the simple fact is, if you took an average human and placed them in that environment all their life, they'd come to the same conclusion. The anger was all gone now from the predator, replaced with a sad melancholy. Those who chose to lie to you, to remove any chance of finding the truth, tell you doing bad things will help people. Those who decided it was fine to give a 12-year-old orphan a flamethrower, those people are evil. They removed your choice. Of course, this no longer applies. A smile widened over Joseph's face again. I far preferred that to the anger or sadness of before. You now have the choice to find the truth. Humans exist, and you have access to the information you need. Whether you decide to open up a puppy sanctuary or burn down the entire forest, that choice is now on you and you alone. The fact that you decided to talk with me when given the opportunity gives me optimism that you'll make the right ones. A lump appeared in my throat at the human's last sentence. Would he still think that if he knew why I was actually here, if he could see the recording device, if he could see my goal to reveal the human's evil plan? Why do you feel as if you're making the wrong choice?